Hey everyone, it's Jeff. I know it's been a while, but I had some time today, so let's talk about James Wiseman and the Warriors. And I think the fit between the two parties isn't as good as I thought it could have been. And I don't think it's really Wiseman's fault, and I don't necessarily blame the Warriors too. It's like I'm not going to blame either party too much. And of course, there's still a good chance it works out very well between the two. But before I get into that, I need to kind of talk about something that's really important about this, and it's kind of like the fundamental problem with centers these days, where in order to understand why the center position is so difficult to value these days, you need to understand two very important skills in basketball first. The first is rim protection, because this is the person who prevents, not person, rim protection is a skill that prevents the other team from getting the easiest shot in basketball, right? Because layups and just shots around the basket are the most efficient shot in basketball. And you want rim protectors who can consistently protect the basket and reliably bait air to be help defense, cut off drivers, and just to make things more difficult around the hoop. That's the most important part of any team's defense, because that's what anchors their team's defense. You will not be able to have a good defense unless you have reliable rim protectors. The second part is just screen setting and rebounding and kind of the hustle stuff, I guess. Screens are obviously extremely important, and they're pretty underrated in terms of people appreciating them enough. Because when you think about all the great shooters in NBA today, right? Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, even Damian Lillard, right, who's mostly a off the dribble shooter. It's very difficult for them to get those shots off without having a solid screen setter who can, block your defender for you. And a similar thing with defensive rebounding, because the defensive possession obviously doesn't end until your team gets the rebound, right? And it's not just about rebounding, it's about boxing out. Because a lot of the times, the best big men in the league, I guess, the best role players, they don't actually get the rebound, but they box out the people who could have gotten the offensive rebound. And that's equally important. And you can see this all the time with Steven Adams and Russell Westbrook back on the Thunder, where Adams would box out to people and he wouldn't go for a rebound himself. He would let Westbrook grab it. But in that situation, you might as well kind of just give the rebound to him as well, because he's equally important in gathering the rebound. And this is where it comes into we're valuing centers, because all of these things I just listed, the other four positions can do them as well. But the center position is where that's the spot where these skills are most likely to come from, right? And these are the things that are expected of you if you're going to be a center in the NBA. And so my point is, unless you're a superstar on offense, like Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid, or Nikola Jokic, it is very difficult to be a highly valued center in NBA if you can't do those things I was talking about consistently. And it's not sexy. It doesn't show up in the stat line. And more often than not, it gets taken for granted. But if you want to be the starting center on a championship team, you have to be able to do those things I just talked about. And this is where the problem comes in with James Wiseman, because the Golden State Warriors, they've always been a team that relies on Steph and Klay and Draymond and those guys to kind of facilitate their offense. And from the center position, all they've ever asked for is a guy to set screens, grab rebounds, protect the basket, and just not get in the way. And we've seen that with Zaza Pachulia. Andrew Bogut is obviously better, but he did all those things to a greater level, but he still did them. And even Kevon Looney too. And right now, James Wiseman doesn't know how to do these things, because he's basically transitioning straight from high school to the NBA. And he didn't play in college because he played 2 games before being suspended, or he left the team. Basically, he didn't play in college, is my point. And he hasn't yet learned how to do these things, because back in high school, he was always just the offensive superstar, and that wasn't his focus. And earlier this year, when he came into the league, I thought that this could be a great spot for Wiseman, because, here in Golden State, he can learn how to do those things because that's what they're going to need from him. But one thing that I didn't account for enough is that Wiseman himself might not be, content to just do those things for now with Golden State. Wiseman's upside comes from his offense, right? Because he's such an instinctive scorer, and there's just so often, even in NBA, he pulls off a move or he makes a shot that, really makes you think about what he can be in the NBA as a scorer. Because we see Joel Embiid now these days, if he was in the league 20 years ago, right, he would just be a back-to-the-back scorer. But this season, you're seeing him go off the dribble from 3-point line almost. He's taking pull-up mid-range shots, and it's not Kevin Durant-esque, because he's not as fluid as KD. And it's very obvious he's a big man when he's doing these things. But he's still going off the dribble and basically scoring in every which way possible. And you can kind of see how Wiseman can get to that level because you see him make like a pull-up mid-range shot sometimes, or you see him like go into a crossover into a dunk, or you see him make a three-point shot, and you're just going like, I'm seeing these things in Embiid's game, in Towns' game, right? And you go, yeah, I think James Wiseman can do these things in the future too because he's already like, doing some of it right now. But the problem is in Golden State, they don't need him to do that. Because like I mentioned, they have Steph, they have Draymond, they have like Kelly Oubre and Andrew Wiggins too. And they, in terms of just like what's best for a team right now, they just need like a big body to basically roll to the basket and be like a pressure going inside. Someone who can consistently protect the basket and just give them like good size, right? And Wiseman, he can't do that yet. And he's not being allowed to do what he potentially could do on offense. Because he's averaging like 11 points per game right now. But I guarantee you, if he was the one who was drafted to like Charlotte, he would be averaging like 17 or 18 points per game. Because he's only getting like 20 minutes right now. And if you give him 30 minutes and just let him loose, he can be like Karl Anthony Towns or Joel Embiid their first years in the league where it was just them. And they had like free reign to do whatever they want. And I'm saying Embiid too because Ben Simmons was injured the year that Embiid, like his rookie season basically. And if we're speaking objectively, the Warriors would be better off right now, like in terms of making their team better, with a guy like Dwight Howard or something like that. And like credit to Wiseman and too, because he's been very mature about this. Like there hasn't been any signs of him like kind of lashing out or being selfish. He's sticking to what the Warriors are asking him to do, and you have to respect that. And you also can't really blame the Warriors too much because they're trying to win, right? Because they have Steph and Draymond. So if Steve Kerr pulls James Wiseman for like an entire quarter because he's not doing what he needs to do on defense, you can't really blame Kerr that much either because they need to win games. And like I'm guessing that like their plan kind of is to develop these more role player fundamental aspects of Wiseman's games first, which would then allow him to play like big minutes in the playoffs, right? Because Wiseman definitely has the tools to do those things. He's really athletic, long arms, he's super strong. He has like pretty much a prototypical build you want from a center. And as like Steph and Draymond and Clay age, basically, Wiseman's offensive game can finally kind of like develop and flourish more as he gets more leeway and more opportunity as his the stars right now get older and older and they can't do what they used to be able to do. And on paper, that's an excellent idea, but at the same time, it's kind of unfair to Wiseman. And I think you're asking him a lot out of him in terms of like maturity and just being a team player, right? It's almost kind of unfair to ask him to do that because I'm betting that Wiseman feels like he can do a lot more right now than he's, doing for the Warriors. Because like, if we get into a playoff series with the Warriors, right? And they're playing like the Lakers or something like that, and LeBron James is just, destroying them on the pick and roll, and he's making Wiseman make these tough defensive decisions that Wiseman's just not ready to make yet because he's so young and he has so little experience. Steve Kerr will pull Wiseman out for the entire game. So, that's why I think this marriage isn't as perfect as a lot of people want it to be. And it's just because James Wiseman plays center, and that's the position that was the Warriors' biggest weakness, it doesn't mean that it was a perfect fit because there are different types of centers. But I do think this problem will resolve itself as we head on because it just needs time, right? It's only been 30 games, and both sides seem committed to making it work. There's no tension between them. It's a very open and honest, I think, communication between the two sides. Wiseman knows why he's not playing during certain stretches because Steve Kerr tells him, and Wiseman seems committed to just helping the team out, and you have to respect that. So yeah, in conclusion, the fit isn't very, perfect right now, but hopefully Wiseman is a fast learner, and he's already shown growth. So you just hope that it's going to work in the future, and I think there's a good chance it will.